what the long-range fires cross-functional team is doing, and then a little bit about what Army Futures Command is doing. So I've been in the position since last August, but the year before that I served as the XO for the Director of the Army Staff. So I had, I think, the advantage of watching this invention of Army Futures Command and the development of the Chief Staff of the Army's modernization priorities and the emerging multi-domain operations concept to be kicked around by the Army senior leaders and the Army principal officials for about a year. And so I came into the position knowing that I had a lot to learn about acquisition and science and technology and concepts and requirements. But I felt pretty well prepared in terms of understanding what the senior leaders expect us to achieve, how we're going to work in a new organization to provide unity of command over the modernization enterprise, and then to run the cross-functional team as an organization that operates under the sort of the principles of the Army's leadership philosophy of mission command, with really unity of effort. My team is at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. We'll eventually get up to about 25 people, a mix of military and civilian. But the strength of our team is at Picatinny, at Redstone Arsenal, and at the Detroit Arsenal, where our program managers, program executive officers, and science and technology community live. Those are our partners on a day-to-day basis. But our team really doesn't end there, right? Our team extends to the development of the multi-domain operations concept at Fort Eustis under the Futures and Concepts Center. Our team extends out to new emerging partners in academia who are doing some research for us and thinking about new materials, new technologies that might be applied to future weapon systems. But then also our team includes our industry partners. And the Future Force Modernization Enterprise, as it's now called, is a big organization. Some of it's very formally organized, some of it's informally organized, but we are, like I said, unified by a common purpose that starts with the very clear modernization priorities established by the Chief of Staff of the Army. I think reinforced by the hard choices that the Army's already made to fund the modernization priorities. The fact that we had the Army senior leaders go through every program in the Army 2 years in a row to ensure that we were funding the things that are essential, and then finding the money inside the Army as much as we could to fund the modernization priorities has convinced this whole Future Force Modernization Enterprise that we're serious about our modernization objectives, the timelines that we're on. That our adversaries have taken advantage of 15 years of us being consumed in Iraq and Afghanistan to develop systems that offset some of our strengths, that create this layered enemy standoff that at the strategic level separates us as a joint force, and at the tactical level separates us at echelon, so it degrades our ability to fight as a combined arms team, which is what our strength is. So I view our pursuit of overmatch in this business as one of combined arms overmatch. Our adversaries are artillery-centric organizations. We're usually going to have more artillery. There may be times in which they can shoot farther than our systems, but our objective is to be able to reduce that layered enemy standoff and fight as a combined arms team. That's the overmatch that we're talking about. Our objective is to develop strategic systems that can penetrate and disintegrate the adversary's anti-access and area denial systems that allow us to introduce the joint force, to exploit a window of opportunity, to have joint force overmatch. That's what we're pursuing in terms of overmatch. The development of the multi-domain operations concept as the Army's operating concept recognizes the fundamental problem, which is one of access at the strategic level, and then one of again, the layered standoff at the tactical level. So long-range artillery, integrated air defenses. And so the central idea then of the MDO concept is penetration and disintegration of the IADs of the long-range artillery. And that is why the long-range precision fires cross-functional team is the #1 priority, because it enables everything else. So from the effect that has on the team is that we know the Army's made hard choices. We know the priorities are very, very clear. We know what's expected of us, and we have been well-resourced to attain those objectives. And so this unity of effort and purpose that extends across the whole future force modernization enterprise has become a very powerful tool for organization and for solving these problems. There's a lot of pride and ownership. We see from our industry partners their investment of IRAD dollars in the priorities that we're pursuing because of the consistent message and the priorities that's been delivered by the senior leaders. We see a sense of cooperation and collaboration across this that may not have existed before. Science and technology community, Army science and technology community, opening up the books on programs that they're working on to bring industry partners in earlier, because we know they're going to produce these things for us in the quantities that we need. And if we wait too long on that, we'll increase the risk for producibility and look at major delays in delivering systems. So everybody's recognized what's expected of us, and like I said, it pervades across the enterprise. In terms of what we're doing in the long-range precision fires cross-functional team, so that's kind of a mouthful, is we have 3 really signature systems that we're developing, and really all of them have a 2023 timeline for us. What I've learned in this short period of time that I've been in this new field is that from my operational background, I think 2023, that's a long way away. In this business, there isn't a moment to lose between now and 2023. And I appreciate that, but I need the reminder of our engineers and program manager teammates from time to time that understand what the impacts on the schedule and how important every moment is. At the Extended Range Cannon Artillery program is an upgrade to the current self-propelled howitzer that we have in the Army. Right now it's called the Paladin. That's going through a chassis upgrade that's referred to as PIM right now, which is a Paladin Integrated Management. But we intend to replace the 39 caliber length gun tube that is currently on that system, which caliber length is expressed in multiples of bore diameter. So 155 millimeters is about 6 inches. 39 calibers of length mean that's about 20 feet long. We're going to replace that 39 caliber length gun tube with a 58 caliber length tube that is about 30 feet long. And that system of an upgraded turret and gun tube, a new projectile that can withstand greater muzzle velocities and chamber pressures, and a new propellant that'll generate those muzzle velocities that we need, and a modernized course-correcting fuse will get us the accuracy we need at 70 kilometers of range. So right now we're shooting about 30 kilometers. We've already demonstrated with this projectile and propellant that we can achieve 70 kilometers of range. We did it at Yuma Proving Grounds a couple of occasions, but most recently in December. So we think as a system, we're well on our way to delivering the first battalion of the Extended Range Cannon System in 2023. We're going to follow that up in 2024 with the first battalion that'll have an autoloader that'll really get us the lethality we need at these ranges. Beyond single projectiles achieving accuracy and effects, we need the volume of fire in large-scale ground combat operations, which really is what we anticipate. What we anticipate the challenge being. We need volume of fire against these targets. I try to avoid using the term precision at ranges because it's a little bit loaded, frankly. That because it sounds like you're preparing for the last war. But what we need is accuracy, and the inherent probable errors in range in cannon artillery at the 70 kilometer band is in the hundreds of meters. And so we have to have a course-correcting fuse that's going to get the accuracy that we need. And we're on a path to do that. But we want that fuse to also survive in a jammed environment. And so there's still some work left to be done to get that. But I think we're on path for 23, follow up with the autoloader. We've got some decisions to make later this year on the autoloader design. We have a couple options we're looking at some industry options and government design. So we want to make that decision as early as we possibly can, but with all the information that we can get, so that we don't have a lag in producibility of that. Another example where we're bringing industry partners in a lot earlier than we have before with the government design, so that producibility isn't an obstacle to delivering that capability to the field. Moving quickly to the Precision Strike Missile, which is our operational line of effort. So the ATACMS missile is our current Army missile. It is first delivered to the Army in the 1980s. It has been improved upon to get out to ranges at about 300 kilometers, about 200 miles. That missile costs about $1.3 million. It also costs about $1 million to do the service life extension program, which is what we're doing now to keep them in the inventory and keep them operational. So we're paying for that missile twice, in some cases 3 times. And we believe the price point for the Precision Strike Missile replacement to be about $800,000. So right in that window. So it's from an economic standpoint, it makes great sense. But where we're going to get out of the Precision Strike Missile is right now the objective requirement is to 499 kilometers. Go from 300 out to 499. I'll beat somebody to the INF question, but we know we're expecting the cooling off period to end sometime soon. And if it does, and when we're directed, we'll look at adjusting the objective requirement for the Prism missile based on what we think the designs of the 2 competitors that we have, what their designs are. So we'll look at extending it beyond 499, not to hold us back to an arbitrary number. We'll deliver the urgent material release of the Prism missile in 2023. We'll follow that up with spirals, technology spirals that we're working on. We've got S&T that address a couple of different areas which we want to address with the Prism missile based on demand signal from both the Pacific and Europe. So I think that's an important point to stress in Army Futures Command is the constant dialogue with the operational force, both in terms of soldier touch points along the way to make sure that the design of these systems is informed by our operators, and then also the employment of these things, the experimentation that's going on with the operational force will help us make sure that we're prepared to employ them when they put them in the field, but also that our organizations are fine-tuned beforehand to best employ them. The last systems that I'll mention, I'll move to the strategic fires end of the portfolio, and the Army hasn't been in strategic fires since the days of the Pershing missile, but a lot's changed. So what our adversaries have developed some incredibly sophisticated anti-access and area denial systems that challenge the joint forces' access to the area. It is, like I said, the fundamental problem of multi-domain operations. And we think that surface-to-surface fires from Army platforms are the way to open up these windows of opportunity for the joint force to exploit. The Army senior leaders have been clear. We're not doing strategic fires for the sake of the Army. We're doing strategic fires to enable the joint force. The long-range hypersonic weapon is being developed by the Hypersonic Program Office under General Thurgood's leadership at Redstone Arsenal. We're in support of his team in developing the operational concept by selecting we believe to be the appropriate target sets for it, and helping facilitate with the Fire Center of Excellence all the other things that are associated with delivering a capability in the field, that the doctrine is addressed, that the organization is created, that the facilities are there, the rest of it. We have a long acronym that addresses all those other concerns that we use, but that's what the Fire Center of Excellence does, is address all those. And so, like I said, we're there to facilitate that. We're going to write the operational requirement for for the long-range hypersonic weapon, and that'll be informed by the prototyping that we're doing. So we'll be working very closely with General Thorogood's team all along the way, and he'll deliver the initial prototyping capability to the field in 2023. The flip side of the hypersonic coin for us is the strategic long-range cannon. That's our S&T program that we're going to take to a full tech demonstration in 2023. We're working on the location to do the test now. There's a couple of options that are being evaluated, but this is a strategic cannon that delivers a cannon projectile at ranges that are far beyond anything we do right now. I won't go into the exact range here in this setting, but the way we see the strategic fires, the employment of strategic fires in support of the MDO concept is that if you look at the A2AD complex and look at the target sets that make it up, it's a mix of strategic infrastructure and hardened sites and some lighter-skinned area targets and communication nodes that help integrate this A2AD complex. So we see that the long-range hypersonic weapon being used against the fixed site, strategic infrastructure, hardened targets, fixed sites, and then the strategic cannon delivering a volume of more affordable projectiles against the area targets that provide that suppression and neutralization, again, creating those windows of opportunity. We've got a long way to go on that, but we've started with some initial ballistic testing that'll continue through the summer. And we're initiating a strategic fire study with the Center for Army Analysis that'll help us learn more about refining the target sets, optimizing perhaps the weapon system against those targets, but really making sure that what we've outlined as the concept can in fact work and open up those windows of opportunity. We're trying to think sensor to shooter on all this stuff. I don't have a particular line of effort that's associated directly with developing a sensor to shooter device or a practice, but we are, with our team, heavily involved in all the efforts that are out there, Army 10-Cap, G2, some of the intelligence agencies, and the multi-domain task force, both in the Pacific and the new one in Europe. So that's what we're doing. 2023 is a big year for us. And like I said, there isn't a moment to lose. I keep getting reminded of that by our program manager teammates and engineers. So thanks, Tom, for a chance to give some opening comments. I'm ready for yours and everybody else's.
All right, well,
questions.
we got a lot on the table here. I think kind of before we get back into the programs, let me just sort of start at the big level again, and that is, I think you called the A2AD problem the fundamental problem that this is getting after, and especially fires are designed to penetrate and open windows and all this sort of stuff. I wonder if you might talk a little bit to what you kind of see in what Russia and China are doing separately, and they're doing different things. That you mentioned the United States has kind of been focused on other things for 15 years. What are the more specific things that they're doing and that they're fielding and how they're moving things around that have some lessons that you're kind of responding to or maybe adapting to in some ways?
Okay, well, certainly if you look at our view of China's advances in this area is they're doing a lot with hypersonics, and it's out there in open source what they're doing. They've got a lot of efforts and they're doing very routine and aggressive testing, and so we view delivering this capability in the field of 23 is how we get out there and compete in a great power competition. We have to deliver capability that gives the theater commander something to compete with, and then something that provides a deterrent capability. So in China, it's really I see it as the hypersonic advances that are going on there. In terms of Russia, they are an artillery-centric army, and they are working on upgrading the current self-propelled howitzer 2S-19 and the 2S-35 that will have an autoloader and reach extended ranges. And so, like I said, we're not going for cannon versus cannon type of overmatch. Obviously, we think we'll achieve that in certain cases, but what we want to be able to do is to not have that be a decisive advantage for them, to be able to counter that advantage to enable the combined arms maneuver that we do. What we do at the National Training Center and the Joint Readiness Training Center and JMRC in Europe, the brigade combat team level training, the division level exercises that we do, nobody else does that. Because it's hard, it's expensive, it's time consuming. It takes a professional army to be able to operate at that level, and so that's where we see our overmatch, and the Russian advances in cannon artillery potentially challenge what our overmatch is. So that's why we think it's so important to be able to counter that advantage, potential advantage.
You mentioned China and their hypersonic strike in particular. Earlier, when you were talking about it for ours, you were talking especially about fixed targets that we would target. So in terms of the U.S. Army, let's just say in the Pacific, getting ground-based hypersonic or ground-based strategic fires, what's the relative utility of that? As opposed to, just let the Air Force do it, just let the Navy do it, especially because there's less land, there's less ground in the Pacific from which we can do that. So how do you think about the operational utility of ground-based, longer range, cannon, missiles, what have you? What's the logic there?
Well, I think if everything was on the same timeline, you could have more of a fair sort of operational utility argument. But what we know is that the surface-to-surface, the Army strategic fires in form of long-range hypersonic weapon is something that we can deliver in 2023. There are, I wouldn't speak for the Navy or the Air Force, but we believe that those are longer timelines. And I don't think we have that time to waste in a great power competition environment. And I know that that from the demand signal from the theater is for this surface-to-surface capability. After you are able to, put other legs on a hypersonic triad, if you wanted to call that, I'm not coining that term, but once you got other legs out there, you could have a more structured argument about operational utility, and where's the best investment. Right. But we think for the nation that this is a very important step in deterring our adversaries and giving the theater commanders something to compete with.
Yeah. So you've got long range in your title, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit to how you're thinking about the relative tensions or trade-offs to balance range with mobility, with capacity, and all these kinds of things. You could have a really big cannon, but you're not going to be able to move it around much. So how do you think about those tensions and trade-offs?
Well, I think at the tactical and operational level, with the development of the URCA cannon system and the precision strike missile, we're not willing to trade mobility for range. In fact, we took the early test model, mocked up URCA cannon system to the Aberdeen Test Center, and this really shows one of the outputs of Army Futures Command and the reorganization has been the Army Test and Evaluation Command is in direct support of Army Futures Command, so they get their priorities from General Murray and AFC headquarters. And so when we asked to do some early testing on the mobility concerns that we have on the extended range cannon artillery system, they set up a mobility characterization station and a site at the Aberdeen Test Center, not that far from here, and ran the URCA system with a 30-foot gun tube. This is an important message to convey back to the Army. There was a lot of concern about this longer gun tube and how it was going to restrict mobility of a howitzer in an armor brigade combat team, where mobility is everything. To have something with a 50% longer gun tube. So the Aberdeen Test Center built a dense urban terrain, essentially an obstacle course for the system. We sent some non-commissioned officers from Fort Sill to go operate it, and what they found is that there wasn't significant loss of mobility. It can get loaded on and off the C-17. They did that there. Worked rail load, tested it against slopes. We realized that early on that there is some challenge with the slope. We'll have to adjust the travel lock to make sure that the gun tube is stowed and traveled within in a more elevated position so that it can navigate or negotiate the slopes. So we learned a lot from that. But really it was a reassuring message to the Army that, hey, we're not on some course that is, that we're not on the wrong course here. So that's an example of not being willing to trade mobility for range. The precision strike missile, we're absolutely committed to the family of launchers that we have now. The Prism the Prism missile, which I didn't really mention this earlier, but that's 2 missiles inside one launch pod container. The ATACMS missile is 1 missile inside that. The advantage to that is obviously you double the onboard firepower on the HIMARS or on the MLRS launcher, but you also cut your sustainment in about half for carrying missiles, which are delicate and carefully handled, and then also really it gives the commander a lot more flexibility in terms of how you have your force loaded out, right? So generally a rocket unit is going to be a mix of some launchers loaded with ATACMS missiles, some launchers loaded with extended range rockets, and some with shorter range ballistics rockets. If you can cut your missile launchers in half because they have twice the onboard firepower, it really gives the commander a lot more flexibility in terms of how he can prepare for the fight and be able to attack enemy targets in depth at echelon. So again, an example is we're not willing to talk about a longer rocket, something that's going to be strapped to the back of a pickup truck and those sorts of things. Now, there's a lot of ideas out there from our industry partners about how to get to extended range, but very few of them are committed to the launcher fleet that we're going to have in the Army for the next 20 or 30 years.
Right, there's a lot of ideas. The Navy's got some stuff, but you're emphasizing the launcher.
Yeah, now the strategic systems, there are some trades we're making with respect to mobility. We want to make sure they're relocatable. We want to make sure that they can execute survivability moves. But for the strategic cannon, we're still pretty early in S&T, and so we're not quite at the. We have a list of desired capabilities that we want, but we're not to the point of writing the requirement document that's going to say what its mobility requirements are, because we just don't know yet. The long-range hypersonic weapon, we have stated some mobility requirements for that. But again, if the directed course of action is a certain booster stack and a certain glide body, that kind of limits what you're able to do.
And that's of course common with the Navy.
Yes, yeah. So you have to make the mobility trades in order to accommodate the components that you've been directed to use.
Right. So let me talk a little bit about the H-2AD problem, the fundamental problem that you identified. Yes, it's a lot of air defenses and their own standoff strike, but it's also a whole lot of non-kinetic electromagnetic stuff, jamming you mentioned in particular. So the longer the range of our fires, the more confidence that we're going to need in the ability to find, fix, and the sensors and the communications and everything else, so that we know exactly where we're going, especially for moving targets. Can you kind of talk to and the mass and the area targeting gets at this at some time, but how you're going to get after the confidence in the sensor shooter, kill chain, and everything else to make that reliable?
So I mentioned we don't have a specific line of effort on this. But we're involved in everything that everybody's doing with this eye on being ready to employ these systems in 2023. If we don't have a practical sensor-to-shooter solution in place by 23, then kind of what's the point of putting the systems out there? So we are committed to this. I personally believe that we'll be able to find the targets. It's a matter of sifting through all the information that we're going to have, and we're going to need artificial intelligence applications to help us do that. If you look at how we do counter battery fire now, which we use a counter battery radar to identify enemy artillery activity, right? So if they shoot and we see, we know where it came from. the way we plan for those, we'll establish where we think that the enemy artillery systems are. We'll draw what we call a call for fire zone over that. And if the radar is able to acquire an enemy artillery system, a target acquisition in that side that call for fire zone, and a call for fire is immediately initiated by the system in the radar. It is sent to the mission command system in the artillery headquarters, whichever one you designate, and it goes right to the top of the fire mission buffer, and then it takes an operator to execute it. Why is it such a leap to think that we couldn't have an algorithm that has had, guess what, there's an algorithm in the radar that helps it do that, an algorithm that has a couple million iterations run through it, be able to identify a target after looking at images or whatever the sensor is, and then generate the call for fire that goes right to the mission command system for the artillery. We're going to have to do that. And in fact, our methodology for how we do targeting in the Army now is perfectly suited for that. So we use this methodology called decide, detect, deliver, and assess. And sometimes we make fun of it because maybe it's oversimplified, maybe it doesn't fit exactly into the joint targeting process, which is a lot more complicated. But I think in this instance it works perfectly, because before an operation, a commander approves the high payoff target list. These are the targets that we want to attack in the enemy formation that are essential to the success of our operation. Associated with that is an attack guidance matrix that says this target ought to be shot with this system. If you can't shoot it with that system, here's the secondary system that you ought to use. And then associated with that a little bit further are the target selection standards that say this target needs to be identified with this degree of fidelity. Because if you have a certain target location error, then obviously the system you shoot at won't be effective, right? So and how old is the acquisition? Because we know everything that we want to shoot at probably wants to live and it's going to move and those sorts of things. So anyway, those are very well established. That decision's already been made. As long as the control measures are permissive and enable engaging those targets, we should be acting on that. We don't need to go ask again. We don't need to decide a second time whether or not we need to kill the 2S-35 at 50 kilometers of range. As soon as it's found, it's in keeping with an order we've already given, and we should be executing those targets. So I think our methodology is sound. It is just going to be a big leap for our force to trust. So we're going to have to train it, right? We're going to have to experiment with it, and that's why we're lucky to have the multi-domain task force in the Pacific, who's has been around for a little while, and then the new one in Europe, the Joint Modernization Command, which is another one of these Army Futures Command reorganizations that's now in Army Futures Command. So they are structuring the JWA exercises with all of the cross-functional team capabilities in mind. Our guys just came back from the planning conference for JWA 20, which will be in Germany with a European scenario, and one got all our capabilities that we're going to deliver properly represented in the system, but also to make sure that we're challenging ourselves with the real sensor-to-shooter obstacles and capabilities that we're going to have in 23. There are some, like I said, some initiatives that are being experimented with in the multi-domain task forces already. There are lots of, no shortage of F-22 to HIMARS exercises that go on. I was a brigade commander. We're constantly sending launchers out to places like Nellis and other locations to work sensor-to-shooter issues. It's just a matter of finding out what I think is the most practical, and but what we think is the most practical and deliverable system, and having something that's rehearsed and trusted in the field for 2023.
And in terms of the getting an AI box to look at all this stuff, sift through it, like you say, this is a species of mission command, which is going to be more important in a degraded environment where the bad guys are jamming the heck out of us, right?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing up mission command as our leadership philosophy, because what makes mission command go is disciplined initiative. And what we don't want to do is to take, AI initiatives or AI boxes, as you call them, that are going to help us sort through enormous volumes of information that we're going to have with the Army space strategy and other things. We're going to be overwhelmed with information if we don't have AI applications that help us sort through it. But instead of turning it into a commander-centric type of receipt of information, it needs to be used to enable discipline initiative, which is really what executing these fire missions. I mean, generate a fire mission, shoot it. That's the discipline initiative. It's in keeping with the commander's intent, also in our leadership philosophy. Common understanding, trust is also a critical tenet of mission command. And so I think between the targeting methodology and our own Army-wide leadership philosophy, I think if we don't use the AI applications that we're going to develop to enable the leadership philosophy, it's not designed to enable its execution, I think we'll miss the mark. That's my own personal opinion.
Well, let me shift a little bit. And you're at Fort Sill. Just down the hall is you've got both field artillery and ADA. You've got both CFTs, long-range precision fires, and air and missile defense. So I wonder if you could talk about kind of the aspirations and the activities on offense-defense integration. The Army's strategy documents talk about this. What do you see as the potential for offense-defense integration? And of course, passive defense is a piece of that. And then what still has to be done to get there?
So I hadn't given that very much thought at all. Hadn't really even really dawned on me. Having not really spent much time at Fort Sill since the officer basic course, and so when the air defense moved to Fort Sill, it was interesting to me. But I wasn't getting evicted out of my office or anything like that. I mean, I didn't really see the impact. I knew that it had occurred, but when I was still a brigade commander at Fort Bragg, the second year of command, I had the opportunity to go participate in Austere Challenge, which was a USER and a UCOM exercise, and the brigade's mission was to be the Force Field Artillery headquarters for the CFLIC, and so I served as a fire support coordinator for U.S. Army Europe in this exercise, and that's when I really saw. That's kind of when the light bulb went off about there is something to this offensive and defensive fires. And I think really it is at that level where it happens. I don't believe it at the brigade combat team, at least right now. I just don't see where there's much synergy there. But I think one of the ideas of MDO is convergence, and I think we've got to figure out a way to converge some of these capabilities. Earlier today at a different event, one of the gentlemen there talked about, just kind of painted this picture of a battlefield that's very dense with aircraft, with unmanned aerial vehicles, with lots of missiles, lots of bullets flying through the air, and in a way that we may not have seen before. And if we aren't taking advantage of, I think I've been to a couple of Patriot sites. I've been into the mission command command posts that they have at these locations, and I've seen the air picture that our air defense community relies on in order to employ their systems. And I can't imagine that we're not going to need a similar type of situational awareness in order to more rapidly employ our systems down the road. So I think that it's going to be essential for us to find those areas to converge. I think the clearest path is kind of at that operational level, at least for me. But it's just something personally I haven't really quite got to yet. That moment during, in the middle of that exercise was really very powerful when I found myself spending more time next to the air defense coordinator for U.S. Army Europe than I was next to the G3, and then that's really, as we were talking, we just the two of us. I mean, really, he was kind of coaching me through this. To be honest with you, he thought a lot more about it working at that level, and I know that it's something I think we're going to have to do. It's not I I don't think that's a universally accepted idea in the artillery community that there is something to this. But then again, I mean, I spent a career in the field artillery, and it didn't dawn on me until the second year of brigade command. It might not have if I hadn't done that exercise. So it's just it's sort of it's an echelon in the Army that not that many people have the opportunity to serve in.
No.
So I think
pushing down composite units is you can imagine getting there, pushing that down again to a lower level.
Yeah. So I think Tom, thanks for hitting that up. So there are some concepts for future fires organizations. And in fact, the design of a multi-domain task force has subordinate field artillery organizations and air defense organizations and other types that address all the domains. But that is certainly something that we're considering. I just think we need to take that sort of consideration a little bit further and say, how do we do more than just exist in the same organization? How are we really, like I said, converging one of these, I think, powerful ideas behind multi-domain operations? Because it's more than what we do now is, and General Wesley does a much better job of explaining this, but now we spend sometimes days or even weeks synchronizing an operation, getting everything lined up, and then we'll execute an operation flawlessly, and then the synchronization is over. It's episodic, and we can't. And what I mean by synchronization is synchronizing airspace to allow artillery fires, or synchronizing cyber or information operations, those sorts of things. I mean, that's a concerted effort to synchronize those things for major combat operations, and in a large-scale ground combat operations under the MDO concept is we're going to have to do that continuously. That's the convergence thing, and I think for fires and for fires, but for artillery and air defense, I think we're going to have to find some of that convergence in the middle for dealing with like a very congested airspace, as an example.
Good. Well, I could sit here and talk all day, and I've got programmatic questions, but I think we'll open it up to questions from the floor. I see somebody in the back. If you wouldn't mind just waiting for the microphone and stating your name and keeping it in the interrogative sense.
Sure. My name is Randall Fort. Colonel, thank you for your remarks. Your prescriptions all seem to be kinetic. And so I was just wondering if you've looked at, as a part of the long-range fires, directed energy as an option, and or cyber, other digital means to achieve the effects that you're talking about.
Directed energy is the Army effort for that is also is under the Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office. So the same General Thorogood that's doing hypersonics is doing directed energy. Some of that work was started in the Air and Missile Defense cross-functional team, which is right downstairs from us in our building. I intend to evaluate I mentioned earlier the strategic fire study that we're going to have the Center for Army Analysis start to do for us here in the next couple of weeks. We're going to do that iteratively. We're going to first start to figure out the effect of the weapon systems that we're developing against the A2ED complex, and then as we go through a couple iterations, be able to bring in some of the other domains into this to make sure that we're not, we just don't want to be, and I'll be honest that the feedback I've heard on the multi-domain task force in the Pacific is concerns that it's becoming a fire-centric force. But really, there are some circumstances in which fires may not be the weapon of choice or even involved in the operation. There are other, the other non-lethal or non-kinetic components of the solution will play a much bigger role. So it's not lost on me. We just haven't quite got to it, and there are others working on that too.
Good. All right. Why don't we come up here and then over here.
Michael Gordon, Wall Street Journal. Sir, as you alluded to, the INF Treaty is just weeks away from ceasing to exist. The U.S. government notified its intention to withdraw in early February. Russians have indicated they're withdrawing. It's essentially not long for the world, and this coincides with your mission on long-range fires. I see that you have the precision strike missile at 499 kilometers and 99 cents, but shortly you won't be bound by that. Can you just explain a little more? I know you're not going to, obviously we're not going to violate the treaty in its last few weeks. But can you explain a little more what this additional leeway or latitude this gives you, why that's important, and how you're thinking about how you intend to exploit it? Is it the case that the precision strike missile, that your commitment to the platform limits how much longer you can go, or what do you intend to do with this new freedom that you have both in the European theater and in Asia? And when do you plan to test these, capabilities at longer range?
So I'll take the last question first.
Not before August 3rd, right?
Oh, yeah, right. The last question first is we're going to, the first missile flight test for the Prism missile start in November. One vendor in November and one in December. And we have a plan to address increasing range. The White Sands Missile Range is a great facility that's accommodating just about everything, but can't quite get 499 or beyond. So we're going to find areas in the Pacific to do this. Honestly, we want those opportunities to coincide with other larger scale exercises in the Pacific. Why we wouldn't want to have a more meaningful demonstration, get more learning, tie it to an experiment. So we'll begin testing in just a couple months, and then that testing will continue out through 2021, where we'll make a down select from our two competitors in order to get that 23 fielding. But if relieved of the 499 requirement over the next couple weeks, we'll change the objective range in there to accommodate what we think our two competitors can reach based on their models. But you're right to the point that it does open up the door for greater opportunities. We know that once we deliver this capability, our adversary is going to adjust. And so we're going to have to modernize this capability in the future in order to address where we think our adversaries are going to move to. I didn't really put that very well, but I think you get the point. But where we are right now is we were limited to that. And so there wasn't a whole lot of science and technology into going beyond 499 kilometers. There wasn't really a business case for it, either from the Army S&T or from our industry partners. So what we see from the designs of these of both missiles, and I've been to the design reviews for both of them, is that extended range out of both of them is entirely feasible. We'll get it, but the technology readiness level of that advanced propulsion is pretty low right now because there wasn't much of an investment strategy in it. But we have started that investment in that, and so we see that our spirals for the precision strike missile start with the cross-domain capability to get maritime and emitting IADS targets, go to enhanced lethality with sort of base ejecting projectiles with top-down shape charges, and then to the extended range. We kind of think that's the timeline, but we intend to go farther with it, and both of our competitors know we want to go farther as well. So the modular design, which is critical to the development of this system, means that we can continue to compete components of it, including the rocket motors, to get at the extended range. Those are those. Does that double the range? I don't know. We're not exactly there yet. We think it's a significant increase. It's worth investing in. But like I said, we're absolutely committed to the form factor and keeping it inside the family of launchers that we have now, and that we want that 2 missiles per launch pod container as well. And we think that the modeling that we've done in terms of the tabletop exercise and the war games show that still is an incredibly critical, a game-changing component of Prism in terms of delivering that capability to 499, the 2-for-1, the rest of it.
And just so, since somebody will mention it, the strategic fires, the cannon and the hypersonic missile are consistent with the 4 corners of the INF treaty in principle.
Yes, I'm sorry, those are INF compliant. So we went for a ruling on both of them before we started working, and we're in good shape there. But we will need the relief from it to go farther than 499 and 99 cents, like you put it. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but we're leaning in that direction.
Good. All right, Jen, here.
Colonel Rafferty, Chick Feldmayer, Munitions Industrial Task Force. When I heard your and I've heard it before, the 23 timeline, which is tight, And I was thinking, as we're sitting here today, we're 60 days from the Army completing, about 60 days at most, from completing the 21 budget. So things are moving along pretty quickly. My real question to you is, how do you, as the leader of this group, train your people to not make the mistakes of the past, specifically not accepting problems? And I'm thinking of the hydrogen embrittlement problem with Crusader that was never accepted by Fort Sill till Congress made them take a look at it. And I'm thinking of SATARM that was really put together like an SR-71 and passed every test at Yuma. And even though they were working with industry, they did not have manufacturing engineers because they're normally the slower ones. They brought in the fast-thinking engineers that were really developing and breaking new ground. And have you thought about that in training your people to ask the question that can absolutely bring you to a stop? Because right now you have everybody, 4 committees are fully supporting your efforts in Congress. The Army leadership fully supports your efforts. And that's important to keep going. But asking these questions and being honest with your team, have you thought about that?
Yes. Maybe I probably didn't pose it to myself that way. But one way in which I feel like we mitigate the risk of making mistakes we may have made in the past, or because you have somebody like me leading this effort who doesn't know about the mistakes of the past, right? Because I wasn't really, I didn't follow the development of Crusader that closely or its failure. But what I will tell you is that I'll use 2 examples. So one, last October, we did our very thorough science and technology deep dive at Picatinny. So all of our investments from all the labs under still then called RDECOM came to Picatinny. We went line by line through each one of the S&T proposals, and we had the Army Science Board there with us. So 5 members of the Army Science Board were there, and I sort of viewed them as my coach for this. And that's an example of a group of professionals that have an enormous amount of experience and have been watching this sort of thing, all from maybe a different angle, because they come from, each one has a slightly different background. So there were warnings, history lessons, and things like that were brought to light during that session from sort of some graybeards. Another example of that would be earlier this week. I went with the program management team at Detroit, the program manager armored fighting vehicles, who has the IRCA system in it, and Colonel Tim Fuller and I and members of his team went to a consulting firm here outside the city, and they red teamed the whole IRCA acquisition strategy. From start to finish, and that group consisted of some people with former PEOs, some from industry, and they just kind of picked it apart as a way to identify the risk areas that we maybe hadn't considered. I certainly hadn't, and to coach us in ways to, if we do want to deliver this in a certain timeline, here are the potential pitfalls. Here are ways we recommend you burn down some of that risk in another way, or accept it, but just realize that it's risk. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but those are 2 ways in which I think we try to avoid mistakes, because we are going very fast, like you said, and we need to make sure that we pause every now and again to make sure that speed isn't at the expense of thoroughness and attention to detail.
Jen.
Hi, Jen Judson with Defense News. I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up related to the INF treaty withdrawal as well. I know that, or at least maybe I'm misremembering, that there was going to be flight tests for Prism in this summer. So I'm curious if the withdrawal from the INF treaty has anything to do with the fact that you're now doing flight tests in November and December, or was it a range issue? Can you just clarify what the reasons for pushing that backwards?
There were a couple of technical issues that caused us to delay about 90 days for the test flight. To be honest, it puts both our competitors kind of on the same path again. There was a mishap at a facility that caused some of the delay. followed by Mother Nature that had some extreme weather that made the repair of that facility near impossible for a period of time. So a little bit of a delay, but not due to INF or anything else other than technical and an accident and something unfortunate that happened.
Okay, and wanted to ask a broader question regarding schedule, and obviously with the Army Futures Command, you're all very focused on rapid, agile schedules, and so I'm wondering, from your crow's nest, what you are most worried about in terms of challenges that could potentially derail this magical number of 2023 for a lot of your programs. What are you most worried about in terms of that?
So I'll start with the extended range cannon. That I'm very confident in 2023 for the increment one, as we call it, with the 58 caliber gun tube. We have a long way to go for 2024 in getting the autoloader right. I mean, it's important to remember that we don't have one now, so we shouldn't kid ourselves into thinking this is going to be an easy challenge to overcome, because, and there were autoloaders designed for previous, failed programs, but those autoloaders didn't set fuses. It didn't set complicated fuses like GPS coordinate seeking fuses, so it's got to do that as well. And it didn't handle a supercharge that is a little bit more complicated than handling the bag increments. So I think the autoloader is something that I just feel like we need to lay out the designs sooner rather than later, and pick one earlier so that we can focus on solving the autoloader problem rather than considering options down the road. So that's the one. The precision strike missile, I'm concerned about the spiral technology and ensuring that we're prepared to, because we accelerated that program from 2027 to 2023 to get the base missile out there. You can pull some things to the left. It's hard to pull S&T to the left too, because that takes some time to accomplish. And so right now that's not entirely synchronized with the plan that we have to get the seeker in there. But that's why recognizing that risk is why we work so hard for the Aviation and Missile Center. It's such a great development by them to collaborate with the industry partners earlier. Say, this is how far we are on it. We know that you also are in the seeker business. How can we partner together earlier to address the schedule concerns you have with maybe a 2025 seeker?
And you're talking especially, for instance, the anti-ship increment for the Prism, and that seeker.
Yeah.
Is that something you could, for instance, go to the Navy? They've got anti-ship. What's the challenge or benefit of that there?
So I think that the challenge for us is that most of the anti-ship missiles that are out there are sea skimming. And so they're looking at the target on the horizon, which really is a much different seeker problem than a seeker that's going to look from top down that needs to be in a basket. So really a sort of a 2-dimension to 3-dimension seeker. And right now there isn't really anything that does that. That doesn't mean there isn't capability that could be that could be learned. There are a number of S&T programs that are done by other organizations that are addressing this problem too. So I think we have a lot of sources for possibilities, and I think, but there isn't really a plug and play solution that's out there, even though there's some that are close. But I think the fact that they're close is really what's encouraging and shows us that we gotta collaborate earlier, get our guys in Huntsville working with our industry partners earlier to take what's out there and adapt it for what we need.
Good. All right, this gentleman over here has been waiting.
Thank you very much, and Colonel, thank you for the briefing and thank you for the work you're doing. I'm hearing challenge, so just a couple points of clarification. Is 2023 also the goal for a hypersonic weapon?
Yes.
The second question, I believe I heard you say that the goal is accuracy, not precision. Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Why is it accuracy and not precision?
Okay, so it may be subtle to many. I just think that precision has a connotation associated with it that we're designing this weapon for a counterinsurgency fight. For what we're doing in Afghanistan. That's where the need for precision there was to minimize collateral damage. And so we're willing to sacrifice a lot of things in order to minimize, like I said, minimize the collateral damage. And so that precision is a form of accuracy, right? It's really accurate. And so there are degrees of accuracy. But against area targets or armored vehicles, and you're delivering a volume of fire against these things. You want to make sure they're accurate enough so they have the effects against the target that you want. And you don't want to spend more time spinning up a precision munition to attack a target when what you need on it are effects immediately. And so really accuracy, I think, is just a better way of describing that we want to have effects on the target. We need some help doing it.
So it's not just a function of range?
It is not entirely a function of range, but what is a function of range are the probable errors that make shooting a non-course corrected projectile not really worth it. Does that help answer it?
It does. I'm a student of Andy Marshall's work and precision strikers. Precision, of course, predates Afghanistan and Iraq. You might want to go back and take a look at some of the work that Andy Marshall did, the advanced in his shop.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying,
Andrew Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
I can get in touch with you about it all.
Yeah.
Okay, I think what I'd say is that I don't believe that when we modernize the GPS kit that it'll be any less accurate or precise than now. I just don't want to use the term anymore because it can be distracting. It can get us off the subject. When I'm talking about precision, I'm like, hey, wait, this is large-scale ground combat operations. What are you pursuing precision for? I'm not. I just want accuracy. And it doesn't cost any more to make a course-correcting fuse that's as accurate as 50 meters to 5 meters. I mean, in some cases it's going to achieve accuracy somewhere in between of that. That's what we do right now with the system, and I don't think we're going to lose much of that. But it does get to when we're operating in a jammed environment, is how much anti-jam capability do we really need? How much accuracy will we lose in the descending branch of the trajectory if jammed, and is it still accurate enough? If it takes us from 5 meters out to 25, that might be good enough, probably is. If it takes us from 20 out to 60, I don't know, maybe we might want to consider that. But that's the kind of discussion that we're having relative to accuracy versus precision, because it gets to enemy EW capability as well.
All right. I think we have time for one more. This gentleman right here.
Thanks, Dave McFarland, BAE Systems, Huntsville, Alabama. My question, I'm going to piggyback off of what Tom said about sensor to shooter and strategic targeting. When you look at that, I see a spectrum of targeting opportunity for tactical fires, purely Army, operational fires, a hybrid, Air Force, National Technical Means, Army, strategic fires. You know where I'm going with this. Having executed a couple Tomahawk strikes in my day and lived in kind of the strategic fires, hey Robbie, the strategic fires realm, what is the Army thinking about? Because you're throwing a weapon into the joint targeting process, which is right now centered around a 72-hour ATO cycle and getting better. But what is the Army thinking about that on the front end of the kill chain with regard to small sats, pseudo-sats, and organic targeting for strategic fires weapons?
I don't think we're as tied to organic targeting versus somebody else's targeting. Like, that's not really the discussion. I think that we'll figure that part of it out. I think the thing that we're trying to stress here is that we see this as a weapon system it's the combatant commander's weapon system. Not that it's an Army commander out there that's trying to figure out how to get the hypersonic weapon into the ATO cycle and planning ahead. We really see it as a strategic weapon for a strategic commander. that's going to make those decisions. And could it be early in a campaign when we know where those targets are to start something? And absolutely, then they could be pre-planned and the rest of that. But we also know there's significant deconfliction for some of these systems that will require multiple combatant commands to be involved in. So this is not employing those things is not an easy thing, and we have not gotten to all that yet. We are on the path, but we can't wait until we sort out all that stuff to start working on the materials solution. This is one of the things that's really exciting, at least from my end, about Army Futures Command, and is while we're still writing the operational concept, we're working on the materials solutions in prototype form that are informing the requirements for the documents, and the requirements are informing the development of the multi-domain operations, which, by the way, the experimentation in the middle with the capabilities we're going to deliver is informing the sort of TTP, how we're going to fight these systems and the organizations that we have. So we can't wait on one of those things to be fully cooked until we start on the rest of it. It's all got to happen in a simultaneous fashion. In the information age, we've got to move more quickly.
I agree with that, but let me rephrase it. So the speed of effect of a hypersonic weapon is measured in minutes, covering strategic ranges, against a targeting system that's 20th century that's measured in hours. So you're going to lose something there if you're not thinking about it together. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm
Yeah. So if I could remember the very, very complicated acronym for the session that's going on today that our team at Fort Sill is participating in, but it really addresses Hypersonic Mission Command and something else. It's an atrocious abbreviation of something that's really long, so I can't remember it. But those working groups are starting, and the Army's involved in it now in maybe ways we haven't been before. So maybe the next time we do one of these, I'll have a better answer for you.
All right, well, this is great. I know you got a lot on your plate. We appreciate your taking the time, and I hope all of you will please join me in thanking Colonel Rafferty.
Great. Thank you.